coming into a profitable company and helping to unpack current state and then to kind of show what the future could look like if you implement change, I think is still a little daunting. Especially if you're doing well, right? If I'm a partner at a company and I'm making money and we're growing at a set rate year over year and status quo kind of feels right. I know from publications and I know from industry and I know from my customers that everyone's talking about change, but frankly, current state's not too bad, right? I think getting from there to what it could look like with delivering just an incredible and insanely good client experience is where the conversation starts to get compelling.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be an awesome one. Our guest is an Intuit Business Development Manager for National Accounts, and he is an author on Intuit Pro Connect. He would also love to hear from you on Twitter at SMBIZPro. Robbie Randall, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit of your career journey leading up to this point.
Sure. Oh my gosh. Where to start with that question? Well, first of all, thank you too for having me. This is very exciting, Michael. I love the opportunity to just speak about opportunities that I'm finding and we're finding as a company in the industry. And they are vast. So a little bit about me. I come from a military family, lots of travel. Didn't really get the opportunity as a young person to develop those roots that I think some families may have experienced. So for me, I fell into a category of at-risk youth as a young person. From there, we traveled a lot. I got into restaurant very early on, and throughout my 20s was really just making very poor decisions, to be frank with you. I did get connected with some people who kind of helped me out of that cycle. And I'm super grateful for that. Part of what they did for me to help me break kind of some of those behaviors that I had was they helped me understand that success touched many areas of my life. It was relational, it was in my employment, and it was also in the way that I could give back and help others. So to pivot into today, the last 10 years, I've been in the tax and accounting industry, and I've always had this kind of itch or desire to look at a situation, figure out what the opportunities were to make it better than current state, and then really dig in and try to figure it out with the folks that I was working with. The accounting industry is one of those spaces where I just uncover opportunities daily. I'm currently working with some of the top firms in the country as they work through this process of migrating from a very backward-looking, historical, compliance-driven focus to a forward-looking advisory focus. So it's very exciting, lots of opportunity. And again, thank you for allowing me to kind of share that with you today.
Beautiful. Well, it's great to have you. And it's an interesting background that you have. And just in terms of having empathy, how have you found those challenging years in your life? How are they showing up today in the work that you do with small and large businesses?
Yeah, great question. So I think the financial literacy piece for me rings true on almost a daily basis. I mean, we think about small businesses. You and I were talking earlier. US Bank is saying now that 82% of businesses fail due to cash flow. And when you think as a small business about cash flow, what I've found a lot of times is that focus tends to be the checking account, right? Or the business checking account. What do I have in the bank? And you and I both know that that is a mistake. That's a misnomer. It's a recipe for disaster in many cases. And early on for me, getting taught, hey, you really need to investigate and learn about finance to be successful. And I find that that's where we compare, business owners with professionals in the bookkeeping and accounting space to really give them that leg up on that business opportunity and business idea.
Interesting. You mentioned a little bit about the work that you do, but you work with the top 200 firms. Tell us a little bit about that and the role. What is your mission on this role to work with this group of businesses?
Absolutely. So I think Ashton Kutcher may have said it best this year at QuickBooks Connect. And if you haven't been to QuickBooks Connect, please beg, borrow, steal, whatever you need to do to get there this year. It's a game changer. Back to Ashton Kutcher. He works with a nonprofit or helps run a nonprofit that is trying to eliminate sex trafficking, and especially in the space of children. So he's working very diligently to just eradicate that globally. And what he found, and if I can paraphrase, what he found is that those nonprofits who are in this space have very little money, and the need is great. So typically in firms of companies of all sizes, if you had problems with wanting to grow or scale your operation, you would throw more money at it or throw more headcount at it. And he found that these companies being so limited on funds, they didn't have that luxury. So he comes back to technology, and I think that's where I live as well. Technology plays a major role in companies' ability to scale, to better service their clients, to not locate and capitalize on opportunities. And that's what I'm finding in the largest of largest firms is how do they in real time implement technology in a way that's meaningful and allows them to do the things that they're trying to do in the space. So hopefully that answered your question.
Wow. So your job is really is like you say roadshow. It's like an investigation into what are they doing, what's working, what's not working, and then is the aim to bring that back for the greater learning of Intuit?
It's for all parties involved. That's exactly right. So a big piece of what I do up front is I just do a hard reset. A lot of our companies have been working with us for a very long time. And I think we realized 18 months ago that things needed to be done differently, right? If you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same results. So initially what I do with the company is what I call a hard reset or a discovery session. We spend a good 90 minutes to 2 hours going deep on process and client experience. And that allows me to get a very good understanding of where they are current state and also where they've been and where they want to go. That's part of the conversation as well. It also allows the firms I work with to really unpack a lot of the stuff that they may have had feelings about but weren't sure. So it kind of lays it all out for all parties involved. And then from there, I feel like once I have a good grasp of the company, the key stakeholders, what folks are trying to do, then I can start to help with advising on which technologies would be best suited, how to implement those technologies, and also how Intuit can help resource what they're trying to do.
Remarkable. Because you've been doing this for a little bit now. You mentioned the start date. I've lost exactly how long you've been at this now, but
Sure.
What have been the key learnings?
So for me, there's so many. First and foremost, I think there's an impetus to change based on current state and maybe even current success, right? Many of these companies are making money, if not all. I would say they're all profitable to some degree. So coming into a profitable company and helping to unpack current state, and then to kind of show what the future could look like if you implement change, I think is still a little daunting. Especially if you're doing well, right? If I'm a partner at a company and I'm making money and we're growing at a set rate year over year and status quo kind of feels right. I know from publications and I know from industry and I know from my customers that everyone's talking about change, but frankly, current state's not too bad, right? I think getting from there to what it could look like with delivering just an incredible and insanely good client experience is where the conversation starts to get compelling.
Interesting. And, it makes a lot of sense, right? The good old-fashioned phrase of if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
And so there's got to be this why as well. I think if you've been in a business for a long time and everything's working, why upset the apple cart? Why change? And so I guess part of the work that you do is helping them discover that why, or communicating the why to these firms.
That's exactly right. And luckily, over the last decade, we've got the data. And data by itself, as we all know, is one component or one piece of the story. You have to have the compelling story to go with that. All of us as human beings, we make very logical decisions, but if that logic isn't tied to an emotion, it's hard to move forward. So luckily, over the last 10 years, we've got the data, we've got the stories. And I think what you might find compelling, there's the very top firms in the country that are maybe even operating globally, and they've made this change, right? They've embraced cloud. They're writing ML, machine learning cycles internally. They're wanting to understand and leverage data. They've done that. What I find compelling is the opposite end of the space, right? It's the 1 to 3 partner firms, the bookkeeping operations. Smaller businesses have to run lean. And many times the way they do that's through technology. So what I'm finding is there's already this upswell of businesses that are already in the cloud. They're already leveraging automation. And quite frankly, they've had to. It's that middle ground of companies, maybe, 3 to 60 partners. They're kind of in that space of, we know it's time. How do we, they're starting to ask questions. How do we get there? How do we do this in a way that's meaningful and with the least amount of risk? So it's an interesting time in our industry.
Wow. It's exciting. And in terms of technology, you say running lean. If our listeners listening to this going, yeah, I need to be running lean. Am I running lean? What are some ideas or thoughts or directions they can go in terms of even identify, are you lean or not lean?
That's exactly right. So I would look at dependencies within your system and how many times do you get in and out of systems? How many systems do you have? And by that, I mean applications or software or process related to each of those, and really start to unpack and maybe even draw it out on a whiteboard or a piece of paper. I start here when I need to get a signature. How do I go about getting that signature? When I need to schedule an appointment, what does that process look like? When I need to categorize bank transactions, what does that process look like? When am I building reports? Is that piece automated? There's lots of ways to kind of unpack that. And then I would really start to look at, kind of draw a diagram. How many dependencies, how many times do you go out from the core operating system into other spaces? And what does that look like internally? Is that automated? Are those manual processes? Are you pushing data out of systems into other systems? Are you, God forbid, having to write out stuff with paper and pad? Start looking at those opportunities to see what can you automate? What can you streamline? Are there apps that work with other apps in a more effective way? To me, that seems like the most obvious place to start in the business.
It's very, very cool thought. And recently, we did a little bit of that. I mean, it wasn't planned, but we started looking at our own stack, and and it was spurred on by new technology. So we moved to a CRM platform called HubSpot, and and so we're moving away. And at first, HubSpot was like, oh my goodness, how could we ever move to this? The cost of it, all of these implications, like you've got to implement these. I mean, it's a lot of change. Everything that you've said, we experienced recently. And the person working with me from HubSpot said, look, go and write down all of the different tools that you're using. What are the costs of those tools? Is that process lean? Is it, they have this concept called friction versus frictionless in business. And I was like, I love that. I was like, do we have friction? And it's like, when I started to think about friction, it's like friction was everywhere. And so in that process, I need to like map this out. And so, because I sort of built things, we'd been building things as we went. So I picked up a license of Lucid Chart. Now there's a bunch of different diagramming, there's all sorts of different apps you can use for this, but I just literally started with one box and it's like, this is where we start, and then we do that, and then we do this. And the next thing you knew, it was like over a couple of hours of time, I had like this whole process in front of me visually. And it just totally changed my thinking about making this change, and the benefit and the reduction of all these, a whole handful of applications that we'll no longer need. But the exciting thing was this whole diagramming is that the diagram it changes mentally for me. It changed the way I looked at the business, looked at the flow, and then actually gave me power to actually change it. So the outcome now is things are much simpler. And that's leading to, like, now I'm seeing, it's like, wow, the lean, that's moving towards lean. It's not like I changed a whole bunch of things, but it's like those little tiny increments that lead to big outcomes.
Oh, it's the biggest outcomes. And then when you look at things at scale, right? Let me take a step back. The first thing that does is, if you're not making those changes, it keeps you from scaling, which may not be good. Of course, there are businesses out there that are perfectly happy, mom and pop, or whatever the scenario is. You're in your town, you're providing a service, customers love you. Absolutely continue to do that. What I'm finding with millennials and young entrepreneurs, they want to scale, they want to grow. And those processes will keep you from doing that, or it'll make scaling very expensive and it'll make it
painful.
A very process, right?
Painful. Well, I looked at like, it's like, how do I, we're always asking the question. It's like, if I wasn't doing this, how could someone else do it? Right. And how do we remove ourselves from the equation? And what's that going to look like if we had to do it? And part of that journey of looking at the current CRM we're using and the pieces we're using, I mean, it's like, for me to explain it, to diagram it, it was like very ugly, very messy. So the cost there, and all of our firms, listeners' firms, is the same thing. And when we're bringing on people into our firms, how will we train them? If we can do something that makes it easier, that then enables us to actually scale less painfully, because they know how to do it. It's easier. I mean, that was the beautiful conversation that Michael Gerber wrote in eMyth, was removing jiggly locks, right? It's like the old jiggly lock. It's like, how do we get the key doesn't work? Oh, it does. Just keep jiggling it. It's like, most people give up, right, after it jiggles a bit. So, the roadblocks in a business are crazy.
So 10 years ago or more, when I started in this industry, I had a mentor who used to say, and it's a little graphic, hopefully not too graphic for the listeners, but always said to me, how do you boil a frog, right? You don't throw a frog in a hot pot of boiling water, it'll jump out. Basically, you turn the heat up slowly over time, and the frog will just sit there, and eventually you'll have frog legs for dinner. But that's the same thing, right? We build up these systems, we add these dependencies, we develop the best we can at the time. And what we find is, with technology moving so quickly, in very short order, those systems, maybe they can be replaced with something more efficient that'll save you a ton of money over the long term. So yeah, great analogy with the jiggly lock. I wrote that one down.
It's a good one. That one goes to Michael Gerber. Absolutely. So love that conversation, and diagramming great tip. And I think what prevented me sometimes from taking a look at some of these processes is just the thought that, wow, how this will take a lot of work, a lot of time, but start with one box and then add another and another and another. And eventually it turns into something very powerful, very valuable. And so I think the encouragement is our listener to do that with some of your processes. Start to take a look at it and identify where you can improve, making yourself more lean. And that concept of frictionless, which is a concept from HubSpot around business, right? Where is it friction for you? Where is it friction for your customer? Where is friction happening for your staff? You move a little bit of friction, it's like good things happen. Now,
would you like to take that down a level? I think there's another space or another area where that can be even more compelling.
Please do, yes.
It's bringing the staff along on that journey. I think that's another area where I find a great amount of opportunity. Leaders want to lead, which is wonderful. And many times I find, especially in the largest of the firms in the country, they take on a lot of that work. And I think there's an opportunity there to, I always say, get some beer or wine, grab some pizza. They do it on a Saturday afternoon or make it a lunch and learn, but bring the staff in, have them help map out this stuff, have them share and be a part of that journey. I think at the end, once it's time to execute, finding buy-in is not as difficult. And I think things happen faster.
Beautiful recommendation. I think as leaders, and anybody who's running their own business has leadership, and it's that type of person, is to think that, you've got to right the ship, you've got to write the playbook and all the rest of it. But as your recommendation, we never know what gifts we'll get when we ask questions.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and when people own the answers, they own the answers, right? So
it becomes easy, right? And I think there's something powerful there when, as a company, if we are able to do this together, I think it just happens in a more cohesive and elegant way, for lack of a better word, than a top-down approach, which is I find that more often than not, the top-down approach. And I got to tell you, it wears out managers, it wears out partners. A lot of the times the staff don't feel, maybe there's an opportunity for them to feel more valued. The other thing I find, especially with transformation from the compliance to advisory, even in the bookkeeping, still maybe especially in the bookkeeping space, is that there's this fear that technology and automation is going to eliminate headcount. And I got to tell you, with a decade of experience, that I have not seen that ever, not once. The work changes, maybe definitions change, maybe titles evolve, but the reality is that technology unleashes a higher level of capability, and I don't see that eliminating headcount. So if there's this fear out there that, okay, I'll take a bite at the apple, I'll buy into what you're telling us today. If I do that, I don't want to be out of a job in the next 5 years because of artificial intelligence. I can almost assure you that that's not going to happen.
I agree with you. And I think we just need to look at our own lives and look at how we get things done. If we think about all the things that, the high value things we could be doing with our time during the day, we're not doing those, right? For the most part, we're doing the other things, the noise. If we're removing noise and inefficiencies, we have a long way to go before people are spending more of their day on high value, the nice to have, the nice to be doing projects. Yeah. And so it's like, but it's counterintuitive because people do think like, well, geez, if I remove what I'm doing today, I won't have a job. No, you'll just be doing something else that's a heck of a lot more valuable to our growth and to the success of ourselves and our customers. It'll be a long time before we're made redundant in a business. Maybe they're not taking on new headcount for something because they're moving people into more higher value positions that they would have had to hire for perhaps down the track. So a great thinking, and I think opens it to having buy-in from the team.
Maybe that's another opportunity as a leader, right? Making that commitment and stating that commitment. It's something that our former CEO did when I had just moved to Texas from Atlanta. I'd been working remote in Atlanta for Intuit and then moved to Texas to a campus, right? And he had made an announcement, look, we're evolving, we're changing, things are happening fast, but my commitment is that we are not going to lose headcount. We are going to retool you for the future. And you're hearing it from me. So that moment as an employee meant so much to me. It gave me just high confidence in the changes that we were making. And I really felt at the end of the day like I still had a place in the organization if I asserted myself, tried, and stayed open to learning, right? If I did my part. And that was a very powerful moment.
That's awesome. That's the reason why the company's doing so well. Great leaders and also great environment and great team putting together those plans and executing on them. So a great story. Now, you had mentioned a little bit about financial education.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that. This is a big opportunity for our listeners.
Absolutely. I got my start in our industry speaking with small businesses and small business owners. I've done some talks with SBA, which is an organization that I absolutely adore. I don't, in our industry, I don't hear a lot about the SBA, and I think that's Small Business Association. I think that's a shame. They've got a lot of great resources. SBA.gov if you're in the US. Just a wonderful institution, a lot of good stuff happening there. Their local chapters are fantastic. But yeah, I think if you look at the statistics, all the data still points to half of all business failing in the first 5 years. That's getting thrown out quite a bit. A third of all businesses failing in the first 2. Those statistics you hear pretty often. I think really when you start to unpack why those businesses are failing, what I'm not hearing is that they're bad business ideas, right? I'm hearing less about that component and more about the financial literacy piece. How are they managing their cash? Do they have enough liquidity in their business? Are they forecasting if they're seasonal? Many businesses in the U.S. are very seasonal. How are they operating and managing that seasonality? What is their plan? Do they have a business plan? I heard a statistic. I'm afraid to say it because I can't place it, but it was around 90% of businesses operate without a plan. That's tragic. That is tragic. Lots of opportunity in this space to help those folks thrive.
It's remarkable, really, when you think about it, and our listeners, great opportunity because of the foundation of where they're coming from the financial end, right? If you're going to be able to help a business, if you're educating them, showing them, bringing light to the financial end of the business and how changes there can lead to further success. In Pure Bookkeeping, we have a community meeting every week, every Friday, where we get bookkeeping business owners on a call, and we talk about, things that are happening, what they're going through, what they're dealing with, and how they're impacting their customers. And, they're talking, one example last week was they had a business was losing money every single month, and they had no idea why. And so through just best practice bookkeeping and cleaning things up and making things transparent for the business owner, and then sitting down and actually going through things and making different decisions about where money's going, how things are being spent. It went from a negative $5,000 to a positive $5,000 in a very short period of time. And then over 3 months, there was like a positive return over 3 months. What is the impact to a community, number one, to that business? Right. But then, think about the impact to the staff inside that business, the people that they're dealing with, the ability to deliver a better service. I mean, it's just amazing the impact that one bookkeeping firm is having on a community.
That's exactly right. And the power of connecting businesses with pros is mind-blowing. We've got data that shows of the businesses in operation, if they are able to connect with a professional like a bookkeeper, it takes them out of that 50% fail rate and puts them into its mid 80th percentile success rate. It's phenomenal what can happen when you can connect someone with a pro. And you're speaking to it remarkably. I love that story. I can imagine there's probably 100 stories a day like that in any given city if you give it the time and put a little intentionality into seeking out the people that can help you.
Absolutely. And I think it's also the encouragement, because I know it's not happening enough. Yeah. And that's the call to our listener is you have a place. There is a purpose here. There is a need. Not only will it help the community greatly, but it will help your business greatly. I mean, it makes business sense to get into this, and everybody's talking about advisory. I mean, don't overthink it. No. Sit down. Here's some advisory. Sit down and go over the numbers once a month, right? How many business owners don't look at the numbers? I guarantee you, as simple as that is, it's not being done. It's like right. It's like business as usual, right? Even the companies that you're talking about, successful companies doing things well, it's all working well. If we just sat down, I guarantee you, if we spent 1 hour in a month and looked at it, there'd be an improvement because of just what gets measured, gets managed. That simple old time philosophy of business management is just simply measuring something. It will be able to be improved and managed. And so advisory at the core level is just simply giving people the what so and having a conversation around the what so in their business.
Bringing up a very good point. What I hear sometimes, and I'll just put it, let's have a transparent conversation. What I hear sometimes when I'm on the road and I have interactions with bookkeepers from time to time, I hear I don't want to have customer conversations. My job's in the back. I don't want to be out front, and I get it. But then I think about kind of where we are in business today with social media and all the other resources that businesses and consumers have just on demand. And I had this thought that we're all customer facing now. I mean, whether you like it or not, the changes happened. We're all customer facing. People can reach us. It's just the way it is. So what I've found is the businesses, the bookkeeping businesses that have embraced that, they're thriving. They're doing so well. Once you can get over that mental hurdle of front office, back office, conversational advisory piece, I think it all just opens up for you. Could be wrong.
I think you're absolutely bang on. And again, even, you create a leaner business, you have more time to actually talk to the customer. And talking to customers where opportunity happens, where you make an impact, where you make a difference. And that's the value that people want, right? I can't remember the fellow that talked about the robots and AI, taking people's jobs. And there's the fear that goes around that. Well, his conversation was, look, what people want to pay for is rock and roll. Like he talked about the Rolling Stones and how they were like was it the Beatles or the Rolling Stones? I forget, one of the two. But rock and roll, it's like they created something. It's art. It's it's out there. It's like that's what people want to pay for is the music, the art, the something that a robot can't do or a computer can't do. And there's a lot that they can't. The things that the robot can do, it should do. And the things it can't, that's where the value is. So
absolutely,
having an intelligent conversation with somebody is not something that's going to get outsourced very quick for now anyways.
Right? I mean, there's the data component, right? Which we need. Not so sexy, but we got to have it. And then there's that emotional piece, and that happens through conversation, storytelling, eye-to-eye interactions. Love, love, love. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Now, we could go on, I have a feeling, for a long period of time just talking about all of the learnings that you've had and the great things that Intuit are doing. We're likely going to need to have you come back, Robbie, and tell us more. But the one thing, since we're on that topic, is just AI. I mean, people throw AI, ML, machine learning. What's on tap right now? What should people be paying attention to? What do they need to know about AI and machine learning and what's coming in the industry so that they can at least start to be on track for just even being educated about what's going on?
For sure. So I can speak for what we're doing in this space. And when you consider advisory, and I know I've heard firms where they jokingly say you have to take a drink every time you hear the word advisory, it's said a lot. But what's happening in software or even in our platform, which is a different conversation, is we're baking advisory into the platform. So we're using machine learning, which is basically looking at aggregate data, looking for variances in aggregate data, and being able to interpret that aggregate data in order to provide an insight. And really, that's it in a nutshell. Demystified, we want to provide insights. And that is how artificial intelligence is creeping into things like software and platform. So when you think about, cash flow, it's major reason why small businesses fail. Through machine learning, running it through machine learning cycles, looking for variances, comparing that data against a very large data set, we're able to say, hey, based on this picture, you may want to consider X, whatever that X would be. And that X should be something that's actionable and provides value to the small business or to the accountant. So that I think you could demystify it in a way that it's very conversational and it's a lot less scary. Artificial intelligence is a different conversation altogether. I don't know that we're going to be there in my lifetime. Maybe we will. But machine learning, I think, is really where the value is right now. And I'm thinking we may have over 100 patents in that space and those cycles running in real time throughout our platform.
Beautiful. So it's essentially the machine's doing some work, teeing up some conversations you can have with your team or with the customer based on what the machine sees, and then that's constantly evolving and just making your life easier.
That's exactly right. And right now it's expensive. So when you think about technology, it comes out, it's very costly. New technology typically is very costly. And then there's that curve where it starts to become mass produced. It's less and less expensive. And at that point, it tends to seep into more areas of our life. So for the example of machine learning in accounting or bookkeeping software, right now, companies like mine, we have that baked in to what we're doing. I'm also starting to see that with very large firms across the country. They're starting to write their own machine learning algorithms. They're applying it to specific parts of their business to get better insights so that they can share that with their customers and stakeholders. I suspect as technology becomes less expensive, what you'll start to find is that you could go out to the web, maybe Amazon in the future, who knows, and buy a machine learning kit and apply it to your own data set and then be able to use that data, interpret that data in a way that's more meaningful for you. Just a guess, but that tends to be how things work.
Cool. Very exciting. Very exciting. Well, Robbie, this has been absolutely a pleasure, a great conversation. And on behalf of our listeners, I want to thank you for sharing your learnings, but as well the work that you're doing in helping small businesses and businesses do better in our community. It makes life better for all of us.
Absolutely, Michael. And just to share that back with you, I absolutely adore what you're doing in our space. Your willingness to help, I think, is commendable and super appreciated. So anytime y'all have me back, just let me know. Glad to further the conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We'll look forward to our next interview down the track.
You bet.
And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.